Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Epperson, CNBC Senior Personal Finance Correspondent. Welcome to CNBC and Junior Achievement Summit for a More Sustainable Tomorrow. I want to start by sharing with you some sobering data and a promising solution. A new survey conducted by Junior Achievement found that 65% of teens are worried about the impact of global warming and climate change on their future quality of life. An even greater majority, though, agreed that business innovation is required to slow or stop global warming and climate change. So what can we do to address the concerns of the next generation, and how can we help them grow a sustainable future? We're going to find out about that today. We've got students who are already ready to ask the questions of thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and investors that are gathered to listen to what they have to say, answer their most pressing questions, and tell us more about sustainability and climate change. We've partnered with Junior Achievement to bring together thought leaders who are passionate about sustainability and excited to answer questions from American teens. So let's meet our panel right now. Sarah Bloom Raskin is the former Deputy Treasury Secretary and currently a professor at Duke Law School. She's a leading voice in understanding climate change as it pertains to the financial sector. And she's also a CNBC contributor. Carolyn Aronson is a self-made entrepreneur and founder, CEO, and owner of It's a 10 Hair Care and Be a 10 Cosmetics. It's a 10 Hair Care was the first female-owned hair care brand to run a national Super Bowl spot. And RV Garbo currently serves as Patagonia's environmental advocate. He previously served as general counsel of the Environmental Protection Agency under President Obama. Tom Soto is a leader in environmental technology, impact, and renewable energy sector investment sectors. And he is the founder and managing partner of the Diverse Communities Impact Fund, as well as founding member of the Executive Council for Biden for Clean Energy. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today to share your expertise and your ideas and to help today's students cultivate a sustainable future. Jack Kosakowski, Junior Achievement President and CEO, is also here with us. And Jack, I just spoke briefly about JA's recently released survey and how students are feeling about climate change and sustainability. We're so excited to be partnering with you once again on this very important topic. Thank you so much, Jack.
Well, thank you, Sharon. It's really a pleasure to be here today. Junior Achievement is proud to once again partner with CNBC on a virtual summit addressing an issue that is so important to our young people. Climate change is on everybody's mind here in America, but it's of special concern for our young people. Our research finds that 65% of teens are concerned about how climate change is going to impact their future quality of life. Now, fortunately, teens appear to feel there are answers to the challenges we face with the environment, and they believe that business innovation has an important role to play. So I look forward to this discussion and know the students watching this virtual summit today will gain greater insight into how the private sector can play an active role in promoting a more sustainable tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Jack. I'm excited to get started, and we do have our student ready to go. Our first student is 14-year-old Kavya Venkatesan from Old Bridge, New Jersey. Kavya is a sophomore at Old Bridge High School and involved with JA with the Women's Future Leadership Series Advisory Board. Kavya, go ahead with your question.
Hello, everyone. I want to take a moment to thank you, Sharon, and the fantastic panel of experts for your time today. I'm very excited and looking forward to learning a lot from this inspirational discussion. This is my question. When businesses pursue a larger social purpose, it can bring more meaning and satisfaction while benefiting our society. How can businesses balance these efforts to serve the community and environment with economic growth? Thank you.
Thank you, Kavya. Sarah, this is a great question for you because you're with policymakers all the time, meeting about this, trying to get this country toward net carbon neutrality by 2050. So what would be your response to Kavya?
Well, Kavya, you are so right. A larger social purpose, like thinking about the environment, can actually enhance economic growth. So in other words, one doesn't necessarily come at the expense of the other. We can actually do both. And you see a lot of excitement when businesses actually have a mission that is related to climate change, because what they're able to do is they're able to hire people, young and old, and people who are excited about their mission. And that actually has very positive benefits. It actually makes the firm be able to meet demand more, more accurately. It helps people. It helps firms stay in touch with what people want. It promotes innovation. It actually creates a lot of excitement. So I think you can do both, and I'm really glad you're thinking about running these parallel.
Absolutely. Great idea. Great idea. Thank you, Kavya. Thank you for being here. Now let's meet 17-year-old high school senior Kayla Awadin from Missouri City, Texas. Kayla is the CEO of a student-led company that focuses on solving issues in the community. Kayla, go ahead with your question to the panel.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much for having me here. And I want to thank all the panelists for their time of answering our questions today. My question is, sustainability is a huge topic that is gaining popularity, especially with so many products going eco-friendly, including cars. So how can companies benefit from going sustainable?
Well, Avi, of course, Patagonia is very concerned with environmental issues, conservation issues. What would be your answer?
First of all, Kayla, thanks for the question. Great observation. Let me just start out by kind of saying, at least within us at Patagonia, we talk less about sustainability and more about responsibility. And so the idea of going sustainable is a great aspiration, but I kind of think we need to abandon the notion that most businesses can be fully sustainable, and we need to kind of jumpstart that process of trying to be more sustainable along the way. First, I think the premise of being more sustainable is that you simply reduce waste in your process. And we know that nobody benefits from waste, and there are cost savings associated with sustainability and circularity. And I really think more and more you're seeing the businesses understand this connection between their financial bottom line and sustainable practices. But we actually need, I think, companies to recognize that there are multiple bottom lines that are important and view sustainability through a broader lens of impacts to people on the planet. So when I think about going sustainable, I think about it referring to a range of practices and processes that are better for the environment. They're holistically better for the company's stakeholders, including its employees, its customers, its suppliers, and the environment. And when you think about it, less waste in the system is less waste in your neighborhood. It's less waste in a community. It's less waste near a worker at that business or in a local stream. And I guess finally, the way I think about it is companies can benefit when they see the rewards of going sustainable. And so educated and engaged consumers can reward these companies. And so the companies who I think operate based on purpose and based on values and based on a broad assessment of what their responsibility is to communities and to the environment, those are the companies that are going to see the benefits of going sustainable.
Bobby, they'll see the benefits as well because employees want this from companies more often, especially younger employees. Are you seeing that as well? So not only as the CEO is she looking at this, but also as an employer and wanting to get great employees?
Oh, absolutely. A colleague of mine once said, "Who wants to check your values at the door when you go into work?" And for companies like Patagonia and other more sustainable kind of practice companies, the recruitment is better, the retention is better. You get the whole of the individual who's coming to that office and really kind of buying into the commitment of that company. And I think you are self-limiting yourself again if you have a narrow assessment of a bottom line at a company and you fail to recognize the broad impacts that you have.
Absolutely. Kayla, I hope that helped with your answer to your question. Thanks for being here. I want to go to our next student, Micah Smith. Mike is a sophomore in high school and is joining us from Clinton, Maryland. He has his own small business called Micah's Munchies and More. And he has a question for our panel about small businesses and sustainability.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me. How can small businesses such as my own can contribute to environmental sustainability?
Tom, your fund invests in companies that are dedicated to sustainability. This seems like a question perfect for you.
Well, first of all, thank you, CNBC, Sharon, for this type of panel. I think that this is the first step, Micah, for folks at your age. Just the fact that you're doing this sends a strong indication to market of the type of ethic that you have and that you're going to embrace and embed into how you run your own business. So congratulations for doing that. Congratulations on having your own business at such a young age. I too was a young entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 14, 15 years old. And that business essentially scaled to a little over $2 million by the time I graduated from high school on an annual basis. So, I think as long as you engage in a thought process that encourages sustainability as part of the fabric of your company, that is going to be the type of ethic that lives through the life of that business or any other business that you develop and prosper from. As Sarah had indicated and Avi, we find that when you have sustainability as a primary factor, as a standard for operations, you're also going to find that that business is efficient and has greater shareholder value and free cash flow. And we could look at companies that have embraced a carbon neutral agenda or some response to climate change. And you're going to find that those are the higher performing companies on most of the indexes that have really prospered over the past 20 years. But the biggest difference between companies that engage in that type of ethic and companies that do not, it's leadership. It's the ability of the founder, the board, the CEO to embrace this and send a signal to their team, their market, their shareholders, that this is something that is important, not just for this generation, but for the coming generations in the future. And you should always hold that and stay true to it, because that is going to be your operating ethic. And guess what? It's going to attract consumers. It's going to attract your market. It's going to attract capital. So stick with it. Don't be intimidated. There's no conflict. You could have both profitability and you could also have a sustainable approach to doing business.
Excellent. Tom, I have to ask you, and I don't know if Micah is thinking this, but what was your business when you were 14, 15? And did you have that same ethic and ethos about making sure that you were having a responsible, sustainable business back then?
It was
Yes,
interesting. I'm sorry, Micah, go ahead.
Sorry. So when I started my business, that was the first thing that crossed my mind. So I made sure that all my materials came from natural resources and weren't too heavily processed. That way, once the consumer was done, it could be easily reinstituted back into the environment from whence it came.
Well,
Excellent.
there you go. That's the
go.
production chain that you need to adopt and run it through the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Did you do that, Tom? When you started as a teen?
did. It was a wood recycling business, and it ultimately turned into a pallet. Wooden pallets. It ultimately turned into a wood pallet company, and there we were selling pallets to 7-Up, to a lot of corporations around Southern California, and I was 17, 18 years old.
That's
It was a
amazing.
blast.
That is amazing. Amazing. Inspirational to our teens and to us as well. Thank you. I want to get to our next student, Ryan Hayes, because Ryan, a junior at Hopedale Junior Senior High School in Hopedale, Massachusetts, has a burning question. Ryan, what is your question?
Thank you so much for having me. What is the best way for young entrepreneurs to make sustainability a center point of their business model?
Carolyn, that's what you've been doing. You've been passionate about this as an entrepreneur, as a person. How would you answer this?
So, and these are amazing questions, Ryan. Thank you for that wonderful question. And I think it's a very basic one, but a very important one. I, as a layman, I am not a scientist. I'm not, a born environmentalist. Really chose to do it as an entrepreneur, really from the get-go. And I think the start of it all for me was having a mother who was very green, who I grew up in a home that inspired environmental, growth and just really being very conscious. So that really stemmed on me moving into the business world in a different aspect. I was a hairdresser. I'm a layman. I'm probably not half as smart as the high schoolers with these amazing questions. But what I did have was a true passion for doing business with a purpose. And I think that's what's really important, Ryan. I think that young people today are brilliant and they really are way advanced when it comes to technology, when it comes to creativity, and they're very, very inspired by making a difference at an early age. And we're seeing that throughout this entire panel. So when you choose to open a business, and like, Tom was saying, how amazing that his recycling business turned into a cash flow business. You almost have to have that mentality. I happen to make shampoo. I was in the beauty industry. And I really thought, from the very beginning, how can I create a business with a purpose, no matter what it is? So ultimately, that was my goal, and started off very early doing things like Leaping Bunny, being vegan, making very certified and conscious choices on ways that I did business. When I actually work with manufacturers, I challenge them to be green. I inspire them to be green. I inspire them to be creative in how they're actually manufacturing for me. So as my company grew, I started out very small, making tiny choices by actually choosing healthy ingredients, doing things that made a difference, making sure nothing hurt the environment. But now I'm a really big worldwide brand. So now I really believe that as you grow, you can start off tiny. You're a small entrepreneur. It's okay. Every little choice you make makes a difference.
Carolyn, that is an excellent answer to that question. And I think what's really important is that you made this whole ethos about sustainability and your passion and compassion for doing it the right way, part of your personal something that you wanted to do personally as well as in your business. So I guess my question to you, and so the students realize, this is kind of a holistic approach. It's not just you're going to do it for the JA business or for a business that you've created, but this is kind of your life's purpose, right?
It's a way of life. It's a 10 hair care. We adopted a shark. And that shark is studied by Nova University. Every business can do something very small to really get the message out, to be a leader, to be an example, and to really help people understand what's important when you are in business. And you know what? It gets the buzz. Like, you can go on my website, it's a10haircare.com, and you can follow our shark. So you know what? Make it fun, make it innovative, and educate people at the same time.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. I want to get to our next student. Hazik Kazi has quite the history. When he was just 13, he gave a TED Talk about an invention that would help clean oceans called Irvis, the ship. He's originally from India and is joining us today from Connecticut. Hazik, thanks so much for being here. What's your question for the panel?
First of all, thank you so much. And I'm really, really excited to be here. So my question is that one of the North Star goals for many businesses today is sustainable packaging, making every piece of packaging either fully recyclable, compostable, biodegradable, or made with recycled content. So when do you see 100% transition to it? And what do you think is the best way to reverse the impact of the existing plastic crisis already in the environment?
Excellent question. Sarah, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, Hazik, thank you for that terrific question. It has a couple parts in it, and I want to break them apart a little bit, okay? Because we've got two challenges in your question. We've got the challenge of a transition, right? How do we actually, in the sustainable packaging arena, how do we actually get everybody to be using the kind of products that you've identified, biodegradable, recyclable, those sorts of packages, okay? So we've got to transition to that, right? And at the same time, you also remind us that we've got some damage, right? We have some damage and remediation to do from the current set of packaging waste. Okay, so we've got challenges on both these fronts. And on both fronts, I'm really, happy to say, we have the opportunities to actually bring technology, design, marketing, financing together to address both these challenges. And we do have to do them both, okay? So I don't want to think we can cut corners here. We've got to deal, obviously, with the remediation side, which I think takes, some new technologies to kind of figure out how we can efficiently clean up what we've done. And at the same time, how do we transition into these new forms of packaging? And that also presents all sorts of exciting entrepreneurial, projects, right? And businesses. So we've got to do both. And then your question of when. Now that's a tougher one, right? Because when it's very hard to predict when we're going to actually succeed in having a 100% transition. And I think the way to think about it is that we're going to build momentum, and we're going to build it actually quite slowly, and it's going to accelerate like a rock rolling down a hill. And then at a certain point, poof, we're going to have a tipping point, and we will have achieved the transition. When that happens, hard to say, but it is like a rolling rock. When it starts to gather momentum, you start to see real change. So thank you for that excellent question.
Great question. And we are definitely gathering and gaining momentum here in this discussion that we're having. We have another question coming up from Sophia Shao, who joins us now from the University of Texas at Austin, where she's studying business. Sophia, what's your question?
Sharon, thank you so much for the warm introduction. I'm so grateful to be back and to be able to hear from such inspirational leaders. My question is, in the past couple of years, what are the most significant changes that industries have adopted in order to become more sustainable? And is there an overall shift in the way that companies approach sustainable development now?
Yeah, Avi, I wanted to get your thoughts here because the Junior Achievement Survey that I talked about earlier, in there, 52% of teens think the businesses are acting more responsibly to the environment today. So is that really the case? And what do you think about Sophia's question?
Yeah, well, first of all, you must have had me answer Sophia's question just because you know that Austin is one of my favorite places in the state. So, Sophia, nice to see you coming from the University of Texas out there. For me, and again, I'll start where it hits home and try to expand a little bit. At Patagonia, we've got our worn wear business. And so for us, the most environmentally beneficial jacket that you can buy is the one that you already own, or more importantly, the one that somebody else already owns. So typically, we think of new materials and new products as the ones that carry with them the greatest environmental footprint. So the more that we can extend the life and enjoyment of products, the better and more sustainable outcome we're going to get. And there are many businesses, I think, just in terms of kind of an overall shift, who are launching lines to reuse and resell their products or that offer rentals. These are the kinds of examples, I think, of more sustainable approaches. You could also look at the electrification of kind of how we get around. And one great example is kind of e-bikes. Congress is considering, I think right now, incentives and rebates for the purchase of certain electric bikes. And if you can just get new purchasers of e-bikes to abandon their cars for trips where an e-bike or a regular bicycle, for that matter, can easily be used, that's an important shift to a more sustainable way of moving around. I also think about buildings. I mean, most of us are either we're going to school in a building or we live in one or work in one. And the energy consumption that's used in places where we work and go to school or live is huge. And so advances in building techniques and materials, and importantly, not just in the building industry, but the greater use of renewable power, the tremendous investments in use of solar and wind energy in particular, that is, I think, kind of a wave, if you will, of sustainable development and progress that we're seeing. And I know that we just heard about, kind of when you reach that tipping point. And I like to think of, renewable power as we've seen these great increases, and again, in the affordability and the availability of these non-polluting, sources of energy. And the more we can both incent and get companies to use them, I think we are going to hit that transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy that we all so much want and need.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Sophia, for your question. I appreciate it. We want to go to another question from Jonathan Gomez from Middletown, Maryland. Jonathan's a high school senior, plans to join the Air Force next year, and he has a question about sustainability and shareholders. Jonathan?
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate the opportunity. My question is, with shareholders becoming more and more focused on short-term gains, how can publicly traded companies better allocate profits with sustainability without receiving pressure from shareholders?
Tom, what do you think?
Well, that's a really great question, Jonathan. You can't really satisfy everybody all of the time, and you have to just understand that there's not going to be 100% shareholder support for everything that's getting done. But we're in an era that's very unique, and this is the opportunity that you, Jonathan, and Sophia, Kazi have as we move into the future. We're on the threshold where a lot of public companies that have, let's say, historical actions that have not been as sensitive as they should have are now having an effect at the shareholder level. Exxon is a great example. You may have seen a few weeks ago that Exxon had a little bit of a shareholder revolt, and the resulting effect was removing 3 members of the board and having climate activists becoming elected to the board. That was a significant shift in the ability of shareholders to profoundly affect their rights and get representation on a fossil fuel company board to change the way they behave. So it's not as though that it can't be done. It certainly could, but it all goes back to leadership. It goes back to what it is that you want to envision for the portfolio that you're investing in. There are entire portfolios and advisors that do nothing but sustainability, no fossil fuels, and so forth. And I would encourage you, as you scale and grow in life, that maybe you take a look and invest in those types of portfolios to assure that you're not investing. From my point of view, as an investor in the private sector, not public companies, but private sector, I'm always searching out those types of innovations. And where is the best set of innovations? You're going to find it in the areas where the biggest problems are. We were talking earlier about plastics. The great sin that is a pending one for our entire planet is that by the 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than marine life by weight. Think about that. There's going to be more trash in the ocean than there will be marine life. How is that acceptable, right? And so, I have a company called New Light Technologies, and we take carbon, we take greenhouse gases and put it in a biodigester, and out the other end comes this material we call air carbon. And it is an alternative to plastic that is completely fossil free, but it's 100% compostable, degradable. Within 3 weeks, it is gone because the same biodigestion process that created it consumes it once it may go in the water or in the earth. And these are the types of companies that are going to be the future. These are, as Avi described, you can't deny the electric vehicle technology industry or EV charging. In California, we have 500,000 people that go to work in the clean tech economy every morning, 4 million across America. There are more people employed by the renewable sector than there is in coal and fossil fuels combined. And so, your type of leadership, just as an investor, really could have a ripple effect in terms of how markets behave, corporate boards behave, and the public equity markets behave. Do not underestimate the effect that any of you could have on these companies. That has been an ethic of mine, that you could always change things. And you could always use the shareholder right as a means to register those concerns and force a change to occur. So just keep that in mind. Whatever you put your mind to, you're going to be able to execute that.
Excellent advice, Tom. That's so great. And so many of the young people that are watching are investors and looking to make sure that they're investing in sustainable companies. So this is great advice. So thank you for that. I want to move to a high school freshman who is now in Maine. Anna Miller joins us. She has a question. Anna, what's your question?
Hey everyone. Sharon, I'm just so glad to be here. I love how this conversation is going. I love hearing everyone's ideas. My question is, do you have any ways beyond supporting your business that you encourage your patrons to positively impact the environment? If not, is this something you have considered?
Well, Carolyn, you've definitely considered it. You've told us about the shark. I can't wait to go and look at the shark on your website. But what else have you done, and how would you answer the question?
You know, Anna, that's a great question, because obviously as young people, I think that you must realize the impact that you have on not only obviously the future, but the way that you can impact as a patron, as like Tom made some great points. Ultimately, you can choose brands that are actually working towards sustainability. They're making efforts. And when you support brands like that, it becomes a snowball down the mountain effect, as they were saying. So I think that ultimately how I've done it in the past is I've taken some of the benefits, the success that I've had in my business, and I've chosen ways to really kind of shout from the mountaintop and use my voice, use my power, use my dollars, use my choices, my little choices even. When I see somebody walking around with a plastic bottle, I even say to them, you know what? It's a great, you can buy one of the metal bottles and refill it with clean water. And there's other ways other than using up all this plastic all the time. You can even talk that way to your classmates, just educating people, talking about change, and actually evoking it in your life in many different ways. I'm in real estate as well, and I love to remodel. Every home I've remodeled has been green. I even got city awards. I was, as far as being one of the very first, it was a remodel rather than a rebuild. I chose to remodel even in green. So listen, the more we do it, it's basic economics. The more that we shout from the mountaintops that we have the ability to make the choice. When we make the choice and we inspire others to make the choice and educate them in a very nice way, we don't always have to be preaching it, but educate them that, you know what, we can all make a difference together. And when we do that, obviously supply, demand shifts, right? It becomes more affordable for people to actually do things in a sustainable way. And that's really what we have to work together. Use your business to do it, use your voice to do it, and use your choices by living by example. To me, that is how that rock rolls down the mountain.
Absolutely. Living by example, Anna. I know you're doing that and you're getting started, and Carolyn absolutely is doing that in her whole way of life. So thank you both. I want to go to a question now from 16-year-old Guy Sanchez, who is a high school junior from East Greenwich High School in Rhode Island, and he's planning to study economics when he goes to college. He has a question for the panel about sustainability and affordability. Guy?
Thank you, Sharon, for having me, and thank you to all of our panelists for answering our questions. According to NPR, 1 in 3 adults struggle with paying basic expenses. Given that sustainable products often cost more than their less socially and environmentally responsible counterparts, what can be done to ensure that everyday Americans have the ability to be sustainable consumers?
You know, Sarah, as a personal finance advocate, I love Guy's question. What do you think about this? What can be done?
Oh, just like you, Sharon, I applaud that question, Guy. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us of the context with which people live. And you are exactly right that there is a huge amount of financial anxiety and inability to pay. And if these products that we're all imagining are going to be so fantastic, if they're not affordable and they're not accessible, then we've actually failed. We have actually failed. We need to be inclusive when we think about what we're going to be selling and marketing if we're going to succeed in actually dealing with the big challenge of climate. So you're exactly right in pointing this out for us. Avi actually mentions the importance of both affordability and accessibility. So how do we make what we're devising affordable and accessible? That's got to be part of the challenge, because if we don't make these products affordable and we don't make them accessible, they're not going to be able to be bought or used by people who need them, who want them, who deserve them, who actually should be part of the transition that we're making to a cleaner economy. So we're going to need to address that. We're going to need to put some of our brain power on that, and it can be brain power from anywhere, right? From the design perspective, from the engineering perspective, from the financing perspective. But as long as we continue to think about the statistics that you're reminding us of, we will succeed.
Absolutely, absolutely. But having it top of mind is so important. So, Guy, I really appreciate you asking that question. And Sarah, thank you for your thoughtful answer. Next is 15-year-old Vanshika Yadav, who is a sophomore at Bridgewater Raritan High School in New Jersey. She's also a member of Junior Achievement's New Jersey Next Gen Committee that organizes workshops and hackathons for students all over the state. And tell us, please, what your question is, Vanshika.
Hey, Sharon, I'm really excited to be here, and a huge thank you to CNBC and Junior Achievement for organizing this event. Now, my question for the panel is, in a world where short-term gains are often prioritized over long-term benefits, how can we incentivize businesses to pursue sustainable practices?
Avi, how would you answer, Vanshika?
I guess the first thing I'd say is we need to shift the underlying premise of your question and ask ourselves, how can we create a world that does prioritize long-term benefits? And again, when I talk about benefits, it's not just the profits, it's the broader impacts on society and on workers and on communities and on the environment. So it's clear that companies need to be rewarded for the long-term benefits they provide, not just, as you point out, kind of the quarterly results of certain metrics that they so often report. I think business responds in general to two main pressure points. Government and regulation is one of them, and consumers is the other. And right now on the government side, I think so much of our certainly public company reporting system puts premiums on quarterly results, and those premiums are really put on the financials that are reported quarterly. And I think we need to explore how government and financial regulations can better incent decisions that have and reward long-term benefits and impacts. But I actually think that the greatest power out there is yours. It's the power of the consumer that's truly unmatched. And you hear the kind of adage, people vote with their pockets, and how they choose to spend their money and which companies they reward with their purchases is entirely up to them. And so I think we're seeing a shift not only in consumer power, but investor power. We heard about some of the successes of investors having just to get, boards and companies to look at ways of being more sustainable. And companies are beginning to respond to it. So my advice, I guess, to you and to us all is to recognize our own power, pay attention that the role we have as consumers can be to reward the long-term benefits of a business. And I think that overall is in time going to kind of shift the responses of businesses and make them, again, less beholden to the quarterly financials and more accountable to the larger issues of annual impacts on people and the planet.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you so much. And thank you, Vanjika, for your question. We appreciate it. Alexandra Rowe joins us now from Florida. She's a high school senior, duly enrolled at the Florida Tech University. She wants to be a pilot for UPS one day and already flies planes. Alexandra, thanks for joining us. What's your question?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sharon, for having me, and Junior Achievement of Space Coast for making this possible. I appreciate the opportunity. My question is, as a student, how can we make a difference in decreasing pollution without having the financial backing?
Carolyn, what do you think?
I think that's a great question. And first of all, I think all of the people, all the students on this panel are obviously it's your mindset. And just as Avi was just saying, and as Tom spoke about, Nan, you know, your choices and obviously the mindset that you have is your power. So for instance, as Avi just said, you know, where you choose to spend your money, that's your power right now. And I don't care if it's a you know, a $5 or $10 item. It is still your power. You don't always necessarily have to be wealthy to make an impact on a business. Where you're actually also, you know, putting your mind at, and that putting your mind into innovation. We need your young minds. Obviously, the Toms and the Avis, and they've made it their lives to make a difference. And using your power, your creativity, businesses like mine really, really need it. So that is what I would hope to see from all of you young students, is that use your creativity and help us solve some of these issues. How do we create products that are more sustainable? How do we make them more affordable to the average person? And there's just so many different ways. I have companies reaching out to me now that are talking about not only sustainability, but obviously the end impact. You know, when we think about things, it's like transporting a bottle around. Bottles are heavy. Even biodegradable bottles are heavy. The gas that it takes to drive them around. Well, how do we do that? Maybe we make it without a bottle. Maybe we make a shampoo bar or a shampoo tablet. This type of technology and mindset comes from you guys. So think about it as you're consuming every day. How could I make this better? Because you are our future.
Absolutely, absolutely. The mindset is so critical. And, you know, we thank you very much for your question, Alexandra. And we have so many questions to get to, so many students who have great questions for our panelists. So we're going to keep it moving and keep our answers short so we can get to all of them. The next one is coming from Bradley Starnes, who's 17 years old. He goes to Hare High School in Garden Grove, California. He plans to go to community college after he graduates and is interested in studying botany. He has a question about sustainability incentives. Bradley, what's your question?
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having me. So my question is, how can we make it more attractive for companies to use more alternative power sources like wind and solar?
Sarah, what do you think?
Excellent question, Bradley. I mean, we really have to figure out a way to make it more attractive, okay? And let's just think like business people. How would we do that? How do you make it more attractive? Well, maybe you've got to make it less expensive. You've got to make it less expensive as an input, right? So that firms, as they make their energy decisions, say, solar, wind, that's actually cheaper than using the current inputs of energy. So we've got to figure out how to make it cheaper. How do you make it cheaper? Well, we certainly would like to have an abundant supply. So if there were an abundant supply of wind and solar and alternative forms of energy, that could certainly help. If we, in essence, figured out a way to make sure that firms had access to these alternative energy sources wherever they want to produce, that would be even better, right? So in other words, try to figure out how to make these alternative sources of energy available and accessible across our country, right? In every corner. That would also be extremely important. But in the end of the day, we've got to figure out how to make it cheaper. And that's really, that's the challenge, but it is something that we can do. It's a great question. Thanks, Bradley.
It is a great question and it is a challenge, but Sarah, I know you're working hard on this issue, on many issues, working with your students at Duke Law School, and you got to run. You got a class to get to. I understand that. We're looking forward to continuing this conversation with you, though, on CNBC with our coverage with UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow and next month. So we're going to be seeing you soon. I'm going to be seeing you soon, I hope. And thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you for having me. This is a terrific panel.
Take care. I want to go to our next student that we have, and that is Visrath Bharath, who is from San Ramon, California. Visrath, can you go ahead with your question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sharon, for having me. And thank you to all of the speakers for giving us your time. So my question is, how can fully online businesses, such as those that specialize in SaaS or e-commerce, make an impact on environmental sustainability?
Tom, can you answer that one?
Sure. I mean, listen, Vishra, that's a really great question. It's more of an observation, right? Because it's happening now. It is crazy. We're in a transformative period of humankind where, and it was accelerated by what? COVID, right? The shutdown. And that increased not just our ability to begin to transfer more economics online, but it has helped to really dematerialize portions of our economy that may not come out of it because no one wants to go back to the way it was. We want a new future, not the old future. And that old future was kind of tied to fossil fuel economics, a lot of brick and mortar. But look at the banking industry, right? I mean, I have a company that I'm a senior advisor to called Aspiration. And Aspiration is one of the fastest growing online banks and financial services platforms in the country. We just did a SPAC, I think it's valued at $2.7 billion now. And, we're gaining more users per month than the traditional banks are gaining at all. In fact, they're losing customers. And it's all because of online, the convenience of being online and so forth. People in your generation and even my generation, are seeing this as a matter of convenience, but also very good, solid economics. And that's going to continue to scale, and it's going to give us tremendous amounts of opportunity as well, what I call remote economics. You don't have to travel 60 miles to go to downtown LA to work. You could commute by using your computer. We're on a Zoom call right now. This is going to fundamentally change things so that we could access, guess what? More personal time, family time. It's an improvement in the quality of life. So indeed, when we see more SaaS and e-commerce based activity, that's going to lead to an improvement in the economy, our quality of life, production, and our ability to be, with our families and so forth. So that's a really great observation. And I would urge you and any of your colleagues to begin to explore what is out there that could be converted from analog 20th century type of economics into digital SaaS-based e-commerce. And that's your future. That's where you want to go.
Yep. I'm sure Viswanath is already working on that, Tom. So we just have to wait and see what happens. Thank you so much, Viswanath, for your question. And thank you, Tom. We're going to go next to Michelle Chen. She's 16 years old. She joins us now from Sugar Land, Texas. And she is the co-CEO of a student company through Junior Achievement. Michelle, what's your question?
Hi, thank you so much to JA, CNBC, and the panelists for this amazing opportunity. My question is, the UN, responding to global drastic environmental challenges, created the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. However, major Fortune 500 corporations such as Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Walmart are already struggling to reach this impending deadline. Is this agenda realistic and achievable for both big companies and small emerging ones? How would you advise companies to achieve fulfillment of these goals?
Avi, that's what you do, right? You're advising Patagonia. You've done this before in terms of public sector and as well as the public sector and the private sector working together. So what do you say for Michelle to do?
So I think it's a great question. And just so that folks understand, the Agenda for Sustainable Development has 17 goals in it. And it's meant to be ambitious and transformative. It's got an agenda that UN says has unprecedented scope and significance, but that's exactly what we want. And these goals are meant to be a plan of action, and that's how countries and companies ought to approach it. When I think of this in your question, I'm reminded of the ending of the Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax, where the Onceler looks to the boy and says, look, unless somebody like you cares an awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. But then the Onceler makes clear that caring is not enough. You need to act to make things better. And that's the advice I guess I would give companies. So yes, this UN SDGs are ambitious and bold, but we know that the only way to achieve them is through action. which any company, large or small or emerging, can take. And so the burden on these companies is to simply embark on a plan of action, focus first on starting the journey. And we know that alone, these big companies and certainly smaller companies aren't going to themselves end poverty or end hunger or ensure sustainable consumption or halt biodiversity loss, but they each can play a role in that. So my advice, is don't lower the bar because it's difficult to attain a goal. Raise your ambition, investment, and action.
Absolutely. Excellent. Excellent. I want to move on now to Santa Clara, California, where Angelica Caius is a senior at Hare High School. Angelica, what's your question?
Hello, thank you so much for having me today. So my question is, how do we get companies to use more green products and be aware of their impact on the environment?
Tom?
Well, I think one of the best ways we can do that, Angelica, and it's a very good question, is quite frankly, we have a lot of opportunity using regulations and legislation by getting our governors, our state legislature to impose upon a lot of the business sector standards that will get them to behave a little bit more responsibly with respect to how they affect the environment or what it is that they're producing may affect the environment, their waste streams, the types of vehicles that they may have, and so forth. And that helps to create a floor of economics for people like me to come in as investors. Why? Because it helps, as we say, de-risk the investment, because I know that there's going to be a minimum level of performance for that particular type of technology that might help to clean up a portion of their waste stream or mitigate it. So that's one way. The other way is, I think there are early leaders. And it's a real honor to have Avi on this panel, because before anybody else was doing this, Yvon Chouinard was doing it at Patagonia. And he had a chorus of investors and people telling him that he would never be profitable, that it would never make it. And Patagonia has become not just a brand for outdoors, but it is a standard term in the sustainability sector, especially for corporations, on what we could look toward as a beacon to make those changes, right? Yep. And now that ethic has infected much of corporate America. And now we have a standard that could be adopted that the UN has put out, which Avi had described. But it basically is all up to personal leadership again. And it's going to be up to folks, especially in your generation, to impose that ethic upon a lot of the companies that you own, that you manage, that you're a part of. Even if you're just an employee, you have the right to make those points clear to leadership. So, there is something to be said about an individual's capacity to affect.
Yes. I know Angelica is ready for that challenge. Thank you for being here, Angelica. And Tom, thanks so much for that. I want to go to Toby Adieri, who joins us now from Houston. Her company, her junior achievement company, I should say, Type Along, is helping kids develop literacy and 21st century skills. Toby, great to have you here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Sharon, for having me. And of course, thank you to all the panelists for speaking with us today. I am so grateful to CNBC and Junior Achievement for giving all of us such an amazing opportunity. And my question for the panel today is, how do we design scalable, resilient supply chains that respect humans and the environment without increasing prices to the point that we prevent lower socioeconomic groups from being able to live sustainably or support sustainable development?
Carolyn, great question.
What an amazing question, Toby. Honestly, I think your brilliance just shines through the question. As a manufacturer, it's like, Tom was just saying and Avi are saying, the choices that we make. So obviously, having companies that I choose to do business with is a way that I can not only continue to make my products affordable, but really encourage them to make a difference in how they actually manufacture. Because we have obviously many steps that it goes through before you actually see it on the shelf. So, I'm in the talks with the first ever LEED certified hair beauty product manufacturer. The actual entire facility is a LEED certified facility. On top of it, they are working very diligently to make sure that their formulas are multi-sensory. They're sustainable formulas that make very little environmental impact. So as a very large company, I want to make sure that I partner with people that are going to be doing things like that. And making sure that we still keep it affordable. Think about it. They are LEED certified. They are saving money in their actual manufacturing courses, in their actual output, as far as, they save money being LEED. And therefore, those benefits get passed down through the chain. How we actually make it affordable to people within all different levels of income. You're using really big words for a young lady. So I'm trying to put this in layman's terms so people really understand it. How do people that can't necessarily afford more expensive goods, like maybe an electric car, how do they actually get to be continuing their life path to be green and to be sustainable? I think, obviously the government has a lot to do with it. I know that Ford Motor Company is about to build a very large F-150 plant in America. They are going to actually make their own batteries. When they do that, they'll have an endless supply of batteries. Well, those batteries, are they going to fill landfills? Are they going to be rechargeable? Obviously, they're rechargeable, but if they die out, where are those batteries going to go? We have to think beyond just the first few steps. And not everyone can afford an F-150. Those are very expensive trucks.
Yeah.
So obviously, maybe we incentivize companies like that as they build these big, beautiful facilities to build these, beautiful green trucks that the average person cannot afford. They also have to build something that is on a more affordable level. And we give them, incentivize them, and the government puts pressure on them to really kind of make sure that both sides of the coins are taken care of. So I think that's how it should happen.
Absolutely. That's great. Great advice, Carolyn and Toby. Thank you for that excellent question. We have 3 students that are definitely going to want to ask you their questions before we finish this session. So I want to make sure we get to them. And Hannah is first up here, a high school senior in Spring, Texas. She plans to study medicine and art when she goes to college next year. She's co-president of an eco-conscious company that she runs through Junior Achievement. And Hannah, what's your question?
Hi, thank you for having me. My question for you today is, how would you change marketing techniques to incentivize or persuade the most stubborn of consumers to make a sustainable switch?
Avi?
Hey, Hannah, great question. First of all, I just want to, suggest to us all that actually consumers do respond positively to businesses like Patagonia and many other brands whose kind of values and purpose leads their products. And it's absolutely true, like you said, you can go to a store and buy a cheap product of almost any kind, but the product is not only cheaply made and won't last long, but people need to understand its low cost also likely reflects low wages paid to those who produce it. And that has an impact on those families and communities. So the costs of a cheap to sell product are many and significant. And so when I think about a brand marketer, I think the main goal is to educate the consumer and make sure that purchase is, that purchaser understands that, what the product is made of, how it was made, by whom it was made, but also the real environmental and kind of people impacts that it has. And I think an educated consumer is a sustainable consumer.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Partnering in your business is also really important. And we've learned that, and some of our teens know that. Mai Jensen, who is a business partner of Alexandra Rowe, who you heard from earlier, she's joining us now from Rockledge, Florida, and Mai placed second in the National Junior Achievement Competition with her company called Green Pace. Mai, what's your question?
Hi, I just want to start off by thanking Sharon and JA Space Coast for this opportunity. My question for a panelist is reducing plastic waste a contributor to reducing manufacturing cost?
Carolyn?
Well, obviously, I mentioned it, and great question, Mai. It's a great question. Obviously, I mentioned a little bit earlier about the actual packaging being a major factor in any type of manufacturing. And does it necessarily reduce cost? It depends in different ways. I mentioned eliminating the packaging. That's a great way. It reduced costs on multiple levels. So yeah, it absolutely does. But how deep do we really want to go? Do we just want to make it recyclable? Do we want to make it biodegradable? Do we want to eliminate it totally? So I think that it really depends on the choices we make and really open our mind to all the different ways that we can change our packaging, which obviously needs to happen. And I have been, as a manufacturer, challenging my resources to really get super creative. And that's why I love this young panel. I understand that you've actually developed a product, and if you want to even maybe tell us a little bit about it, but having these biodegradable plastic, or they're not plastic at that point, really. Those are the things that I'm interested in as a manufacturer. So
yeah, you are too.
Yeah.
Green paste.
So basically with green paste, we looked at toothpaste tubes because everyone brushes their teeth and it's used all over, and really plastic is mainly used in packaging. So we wanted to face it head on and go to biodegradable plastic.
Brilliant. Well, let's talk.
Absolutely. We're making connections here. I love this. I love this.
Bottles a year, so.
Excellent. We want to get to our final student right now. Thank you both. Our final student is Shireen Francesca Framo, who's from Houston, Texas. Shireen, thanks again for being here. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to all these amazing panelists for today. So for today, I have a very broad question. How hard is it to change the environment?
That's a big one and a tough one, Avi. What's your answer in 30 seconds or less?
Not hard at all. It's easy. Look, we can all have a positive impact on our environment. You just look out your kind of front door or backyard, from cleaning up a local stream or consuming or wasting less, or as we've all talked about, making smart choices, how we get from place to place, what we purchase, what food we eat. Look, the fundamental truth is big changes are hard, but they're possible. Small changes are easy and within our grasp every day.
Absolutely. Carolyn, what do you think?
I agree 1,000%. And ultimately, I think it's talking about it, living by example, inspiring each other, the creativity on this panel, as well as all of these, amazing high schoolers. I hope that everyone out there has gotten just one more little idea about how they can make a difference. And that's where it all starts. We all have to come together. And before you know it, it really comes a way of life for everyone.
Absolutely. Tom?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. Listen, it's simple. Here's a more difficult challenge. How are we going to reverse things? Look at the wildfires that are going on. Look at what's going on with these superstorms, these extreme weather patterns. That's more difficult to deal with than accepting the need to reform. So let's just simply reform. Let's just change the way we do things so that others may simply live. And, it goes from your personal ethic to your buying habits. But it's also I love what Carolyn is doing. I mean, that is such a great platform, Carolyn, that you have. And I absolutely think it's fantastic that we have a generation behind us where there's going to be more diversity, more gender balance, more inclusion. And this is going to be, that's why I call it not the old future. This is the new future, with diversity, equity, and inclusion is involved, responding to climate change on an equitable basis, and making sure that we have a more fair distribution of economics around the globe, and in particular in the United States. So, Shireen, you and your colleagues have a great future. You're in an era of abundance with every piece of information and historical fact at your fingertips. And you could convert that to really fantastic personal economics, more importantly, building community wealth.
Tom, you said it so beautifully, and we're all just so inspired and energized by the young people that are here today and by you, Tom, all of our panelists. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I want to specifically mention the panelists, of course, Sarah Bloom-Raskin, Carolyn Aronson, Ari Garbo, and you, Tom Soto. Thank you very, very much for being here, for sharing your expertise, your insights, and being so thoughtful with our young people to really inspire them about how we can have a more sustainable future. If you want to watch any of the clips from today, please go to cnbc.com/investinYou. We'll continue to be partnering with Junior Achievement. We're so proud to be able to do so, and I'm so happy to have been your host today. I'm Sharon Epperson for CNBC.